People in the valley noticed the cabin long before winter arrived. It sat alone near the pine line shaped like a half-moon wrapped in metal. The curved cover shined under the sun and looked strange against the snow. Many shook their heads and laughed when they passed it on the old road. They said no normal man would live inside such a thing. They said it looked like a broken shelter from another time. The man inside was named Eli. He was quiet and kept to himself most days. He had moved there after leaving the town behind. No one knew much about his past or his plans. They only knew he worked every day without help. And he ignored the jokes whispered behind his back. Eli had not built the cabin to impress anyone. He built it because he studied heat and cold for many years. He learned how sun moves and how air stays trapped. He learned that shape matters more than style. The curved cover was not madness to him. It was logic shaped in metal and patience. When summer passed, the valley forgot about him. People were busy with harvest and family events. Eli kept working as leaves turned yellow and red. He sealed gaps and stacked stones with care. He tested vents and marked shadows on the ground. Each step followed a plan written only in his mind. By early fall, rumors began again. Someone said the cabin would freeze first. Someone said snow would crush the metal shell. Others said the man would leave before the first storm. Eli heard none of it, or pretended not to. His focus stayed on the work in front of him. Inside the cabin things looked simple. Wood walls, stone floors, and a small stove. No luxury, no wasted space, no noise. The curved cover rested over the cabin like a shield. Air moved slowly and warmth stayed close. Eli felt calm every time he stepped inside. The first cold night came quietly. Stars burned sharp in the dark sky. Wind cut through the valley and rattled old houses. Families added blankets and burned extra wood. Eli checked one small gauge near the door. The number stayed steady and warm. Days later, snow arrived heavy and fast. Roofs groaned and roads disappeared. The town lost power for several hours. People huddled around fires and candles. Eli watched the storm from his small window. The inside air stayed gentle and dry. Some noticed smoke rising from his place. It was not thick or desperate. It was calm and slow, like steady breathing. The sight confused those who had mocked him. How could that strange shell protect against such cold? No one dared ask yet. As winter deepened, the valley suffered. Old pipes cracked and barns grew icy inside. Fuel costs climbed and tempers grew short. People talked about the cold more than anything else. Eli remained unseen and unchanged. His routine stayed simple and steady. One night the temperature dropped sharply. The cold felt heavier than before. Even strong homes struggled to hold heat. Families slept in coats and gloves. Eli placed his hand on the wall. It felt warm and alive. He remembered why he built it this way. Years ago he lost a home to cold and neglect. He promised himself never again. He studied shapes used in harsh lands. He trusted curves and layers over flat walls. That promise guided every decision he made. By mid-winter, whispers turned into curiosity. People noticed his lights never flickered. They noticed snow melted faster around his place. They noticed he never came to town for fuel. Questions replaced laughter slowly. Still no one spoke to him. The storm that changed everything arrived without warning. Wind screamed through the valley for 2 days. Snow buried doors and blocked every road. Emergency crews could not reach some homes. Fear spread faster than the cold. People realized help might not come. Inside the curved cabin, Eli stayed alert. He monitored airflow and heat balance. The shell caught what little sun appeared, stored it, and released it slowly through the night. The temperature inside stayed shockingly high. Eli knew the system was working. When the storm eased, people stepped outside. They looked for signs of damage and loss. Many homes were damaged or frozen inside. Then they saw Eli walking calmly from his door. No panic, no rush, no fear. Just quiet confidence in his steps. Someone finally knocked on his door that evening. Their face red from cold and pride shaken. Eli opened the door without surprise. Warm air flowed out like a soft wave. The visitor stood frozen in disbelief. The truth was impossible to ignore now. Inside it felt like another season. Comfortable, steady, and calm. No roaring fire, no excess fuel. Just balance and smart design. Eli watched the reaction in silence. He knew this moment would change everything. This was only the beginning. The laughter would soon turn into questions. The questions would turn into understanding. And the valley would never see that cabin the same way again. The next morning the valley felt different. Cold still ruled the land, but curiosity warmed the air. People spoke about Eli's cabin in low voices. They shared the feeling of warmth that spilled from his door. No one laughed now and no one mocked. The strange shell had become a quiet mystery. By noon 2 more neighbors came. They carried tired faces and stiff hands. Eli welcomed them without pride or anger. He offered warm water and simple food. They sat inside and slowly relaxed. Their fear melted before the heat did. They asked careful questions. How does it stay so warm? Why does the cold not enter? Eli answered slowly using simple words. He spoke of shape, air, and patience. He never spoke as if he was better. Words spread faster than snowmelt. By evening more people walked the frozen path. Some came with shame in their eyes. Some came with hope and desperation. Eli did not turn anyone away. The cabin became a quiet refuge. Inside the curved shell warmth stayed even. No corner felt colder than the other. Children stopped shaking after minutes. Older hands regained feeling and strength. People noticed the calm air. It felt steady like a held breath. Eli explained how the cover worked. The curve caught sunlight from every angle. Metal absorbed heat and shared it slowly. Air pockets trapped warmth like a blanket. Stone floors stored heat through the night. Nothing was wasted and nothing rushed. Some listened closely and nodded. Others struggled to believe such simplicity. They had trusted flat walls for generations. They never questioned the old designs. Eli did not judge their past choices. He only shared what he had learned. As days passed, the valley changed. People no longer spoke only of the cold. They spoke of ideas and possibilities. They wondered if homes could be better. They wondered why no one taught this before. Eli listened more than he spoke. A small group returned every evening. They brought notebooks and rough sketches. They asked Eli to show them the structure. He walked them outside despite the cold. He pointed to seams, angles, and vents. Knowledge became a shared fire. Children traced the curved shape with gloves. They laughed as snow slid down the shell. Parents watched with new respect. This cabin once mocked now inspired wonder. Eli felt something unfamiliar growing. A sense of belonging he had long forgotten. The town council noticed the attention. They invited Eli to speak one evening. The meeting hall was cold and crowded. People wrapped coats tight around themselves. Eli stood calmly before them. His voice steady and clear. He spoke of loss first. Of a winter that took more than warmth. He explained why he studied heat and shelter. He explained why shape matters. No blame filled his words. Only lessons earned through time. Some officials shifted uncomfortably. They remembered denying permits years ago. They remembered laughing at his drawings. Now the proof stood outside in snow. Eli did not accuse or demand. He only shared facts and outcomes. After the meeting, people stayed behind. They asked for help redesigning barns and homes. They asked about materials they already owned. Eli said improvement does not need wealth. It needs understanding and effort. Hope moved quietly through the room. That night Eli returned to his cabin. Silence wrapped the land once again. He sat alone and reflected. He never planned to change the valley. He only wanted to survive the cold. Yet change had followed him anyway. Winter remained harsh and unforgiving. But fewer homes froze as weeks passed. People sealed cracks and adjusted roofs. They added simple curved covers and layers. Small changes brought real warmth. Confidence replaced helpless waiting. Eli became a guide without seeking the role. He visited homes during daylight hours. He offered advice and hands-on help. People listened now without doubt. Trust grew with every shared success. The valley slowly learned together. One evening an elder visited Eli. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were sharp. She thanked him for protecting the community. She said warmth restored more than bodies. It restored dignity and calm. Eli bowed his head in respect. He realized then what heat truly meant. Not just temperature on a gauge, but comfort, safety, and peace. The cabin held more than warmth. It held the power of understanding. And understanding spreads quietly but deeply. The storms continued, but fear did not. People prepared instead of panicking. They checked sunlight paths and airflow. They trusted learning over old habits. Eli watched from a distance, proud but humble in silence. The valley no longer saw madness. They saw foresight wrapped in metal. They saw proof that ridicule fades. But results remained solid and warm. Eli's cabin stood unchanged. Yet everything around it had transformed. As winter slowly moved toward its deepest point, the valley no longer felt helpless or afraid. People woke early to adjust vents and clear snow wisely. They watched sunlight like farmers watch rain. Eli's lessons had become daily habits. Warmth was now something they actively created. The cabin remained the center of quiet learning. Not as a shelter anymore but as a guide. People came with drawings and careful questions. Eli welcomed them but never rushed answers. He believed understanding takes time. Just like heat stored slowly lasts longer. One afternoon a young man named Rowan arrived. He had recently taken over his family farm. The barns were old and poorly built. Animals struggled through every cold night. Rowan admitted he once mocked the curved cabin. Now he stood asking for help. Eli walked with him through the snow. They studied the barn walls and roof angles. Eli spoke about wind paths and trapped air. They discussed small changes, not full rebuilds. Rowan listened closely and took notes. Hope replaced embarrassment in his eyes. Within days changes were made. Extra layers added and corners sealed. A simple curved extension placed over the south wall. The difference came faster than expected. Animals rested easier and ate more calmly. Rowan returned with gratitude and relief. Stories like his spread across the valley. People shared results instead of complaints. Fuel use dropped and tempers softened. Families gathered without constant worry. Children played longer indoors without shivering. Winter lost its grip on morale. Eli noticed another change as well. People no longer treated him like an outsider. They waved when passing his cabin. They asked about his past with respect. Some invited him to meals and gatherings. Slowly isolation loosened its hold. At first Eli declined most offers. Years of solitude had shaped his habits. But warmth has a way of drawing people together. He accepted a few simple invitations. Shared food and quiet conversation. He felt something steady returning inside. One evening a school teacher visited. She asked Eli to speak to the children about science, shape, and problem solving. Eli hesitated but agreed after thought. The classroom was cold but attentive. Young eyes watched him closely. He brought simple drawings, not complex terms. He showed how curves hold air, how sunlight moves across seasons. Children asked endless curious questions. They saw learning as something alive. Eli felt proud without realizing it. The teacher later thanked him deeply. She said curiosity is the first warmth. Before any fire or shelter, Eli walked home under a pale sky. He realized knowledge shared multiplies, just like stored heat released slowly. As weeks past, winter began to ease. Snow softened and days grew longer. The valley stood stronger than before. Damage was minimal compared to past years. People prepared instead of reacting. Eli's influence had reshaped thinking. Yet Eli knew challenges always return. Cold may leave, but hardship cycles back. He began documenting his methods carefully. Simple language and clear diagrams. Not for praise or recognition, but for those who would need it later. He spent nights writing by warm light, recording mistakes as well as success. He believed honesty mattered more than pride. The cabin remained quietly efficient, holding steady warmth through long hours. A living example beside his notes. One afternoon, town leaders returned. This time without authority or tension. They asked about future planning, emergency shelters and shared spaces. Eli suggested designs anyone could build. Affordable, strong, and easy to maintain. The conversation felt different now. No one dismissed ideas or laughed. They listened with respect and care. Decisions were based on evidence. Eli felt his long struggle validated. Not personally, but purposefully. Spring finally arrived gently. Snow melted and earth breathed again. The metal shell reflected soft sunlight. No longer strange but familiar. The cabin blended into the landscape. A symbol of survival and foresight. People began adapting the design creatively. Greenhouses, barns, storage shelters. Each adjusted to its purpose. Eli encouraged experimentation and learning. He never claimed a single answer. Only guiding principles shaped by nature. As the valley prepared for warmer months, Eli reflected on the journey. He had arrived seeking solitude and safety. He found community and meaning instead. The cabin had protected his body, but shared warmth had healed much more. He stood outside one evening, watching the sun dip behind trees. The curved shell glowed softly, holding the last heat of day. Eli smiled quietly to himself, knowing winter would return but fear would not. The valley was no longer just a place. It was a shared effort and shared knowledge, and at its heart stood a simple truth. Respect the land, learn from nature. Build with intention and patience, and warmth will always find a way. Summer arrived with long bright days. The valley looked softer and more alive. Fields turned green and paths cleared fully. People worked with renewed confidence. They no longer feared the next cold season. Preparation had replaced uncertainty. Eli spent mornings walking the land. He studied how sunlight shifted across hills. He marked shadows and wind paths carefully. Warm months were for learning, not resting. He believed good shelter begins in summer, before the first cold breath returns. People continued visiting his cabin, not for warmth now but for guidance. They brought plans for future homes. They asked how to build smarter from the start. Eli answered with patience and clarity. He reminded them simplicity brings strength. A group of young builders formed naturally. They met weekly near Eli's place. They practiced shaping frames and sealing layers. Mistakes were treated as lessons, not failures. Eli watched them grow confident. Knowledge moved from one hand to another. The town began a shared project. A community shelter designed with curved form. Built for storms, power loss, and emergencies. Materials came from donations and reuse. Everyone helped regardless of skill. Pride replaced the old doubts. when the shelter was finished. It felt warm even on cool nights. Children laughed inside its open space. Elders rested without worry. The design proved itself again, not as theory but as lived comfort. Local visitors began arriving. People from nearby valleys and towns. They heard stories of the warm cabin. They wanted to see it themselves. Eli welcomed them calmly. He never turned learning into spectacle. Some visitors asked him to leave. They offered positions, titles, and money. They wanted him to teach elsewhere. Eli listened but did not rush. His roots had grown deeper here. Purpose mattered more than recognition. He chose to stay in the valley, to keep improving what they built together. He believed change lasts where trust grows, not where attention fades quickly. The cabin stood as quiet proof that steady work shapes real futures. As autumn returned once more, people prepared with calm efficiency. Homes were sealed, checked, and improved. Fuel was stored wisely, not desperately. Children helped track sunlight paths. Learning had become shared tradition. When the first snow fell again, there was no fear in the valley. Lights stayed on and homes stayed warm. The community shelter opened smoothly. People supported one another naturally. Eli watched quietly from a distance. The temperature dropped lower than last year. Yet fewer homes struggled. Heat stayed where it belonged. Stored, released, and respected. The curved shapes proved their value. Again and again without failure. One night Eli walked outside alone. Stars burned clear above the metal shell. He placed a hand against the cabin wall. Warmth flowed steadily beneath his palm. He remembered the laughter from years ago. It felt distant and powerless now. He thought about the journey. How ridicule had shaped his silence. How patience had shaped his success. The cabin had never needed defense. It only needed time to speak. And time always tells the truth. People no longer called it strange. They called it wise and thoughtful. Children drew curved homes in school. Builders planned with airflow in mind. The valley had changed its mindset. That change would last longer than winter. Eli began mentoring quietly, teaching others how to teach. He believed knowledge should not depend on one voice. He encouraged questions and debate. Growth required shared understanding, not a single figure at the center. Years passed gently and steadily. The cabin aged without losing purpose. Metal dulled, wood weathered gracefully. But the warmth remained constant. It had become part of the land, as natural as stone and pine. Visitors still came from time to time. They asked about the beginning, why he chose that shape. Eli always answered simply, because nature already solved the problem. We just need to listen. On a calm winter evening, Eli sat inside by soft light. Outside snow fell quietly again. Inside warmth stayed steady and kind. He felt no urge to prove anything. The work had already spoken. The valley thrived through another season, no longer defined by survival, but by thoughtful design and care. People trusted learning over fear, and preparation over panic. That trust shaped their future. Everyone once thought the cabin was crazy, a curved shell hiding foolish dreams. But time revealed its true purpose. It held warmth, resilience, and wisdom. Not just 55 degrees more heat, but a lesson strong enough to change lives. Years passed and the valley no longer measured time by winters. Seasons came and went without fear or panic. People planned ahead and trusted their own skills. The land felt calmer and more cooperative. Eli remained steady like the cabin itself, quiet, present, and deeply rooted. The curved shelter became part of local history. Children grew up knowing why it existed. They learned the story without mockery. Teachers used it as an example of thinking differently. The lesson stayed simple and strong. Listen, observe, and build with care. Eli aged gently with the place. His hair turned gray but his steps stayed sure. He continued walking the land each morning, still watching light, wind, and shadow. Learning never stopped for him. Curiosity kept his mind warm. One winter arrived harsher than expected, colder than any before in memory. Snow piled high and winds stayed long. News spoke of hardship beyond the valley. Here preparation held firm once again. Homes stayed warm and people stayed calm. Travelers arrived seeking safety. Their towns had not prepared as wisely. The valley opened its doors without question. Community shelters welcomed strangers easily. Warmth was shared without judgment. Eli watched with quiet satisfaction. Some travelers asked about the design. Why this place endured when others failed. People pointed not to Eli alone, but to shared effort and learning. The cabin was the spark, not the fire. The people carried it forward. Eli was invited to speak one last time. At a gathering filled with many faces. Young, old, local, and new. He stood slowly and spoke simply. Warmth comes from understanding, not luck. Prepared minds build lasting shelter. His words were not dramatic. They did not need to be. Everyone there had lived the proof. Cold no longer controlled their choices. Fear no longer guided decisions. Knowledge had replaced it fully. After the gathering, Eli returned home. Snow fell lightly around the curved shell. He stepped inside and felt familiar comfort. The cabin still held steady warmth, just as it always had. Reliable, patient, and quiet. That night Eli rested peacefully, content with the life he had lived. He did not think of legacy. He thought of mornings walking the land, of questions asked and answered, of warmth shared freely. When spring came, the valley remembered him, not with sorrow but with gratitude. His cabin remained just as it was, maintained by many careful hands, a place of learning and safety. A symbol of thoughtful living. New builders continued the work, improving designs and adapting ideas, always guided by the same principles. Respect the land, use what is given. Build with patience and purpose. Let nature teach the rest. The Quonset covered cabin still stood, curved metal, weathered but strong, holding warmth season after season. Visitors still stepped inside in disbelief, not because it was strange, but because it was so simple. Everyone once thought it was crazy, a lonely shape against the snow. Now it was seen for what it truly was, a quiet answer waiting to be understood. Not just a shelter of heat, but a shelter of wisdom. The valley thrived long after, not because of one man alone, but because one idea was given time. Time to prove itself without force. Time to replace doubt with truth. Time to change everything quietly.